The weight of silence had been Daniel's companion for more years than he cared to count. He often found himself sitting by the window in the evenings, watching the streetlights flicker on, the glow reminding him of childhood nights spent running barefoot under the same kind of lights with Michael, his closest friend. Their laughter once echoed like a promise that nothing could ever come between them. But life, Daniel had learned, had a cruel way of testing promises. It had been a single misunderstanding, the kind of careless moment that could have been mended with a word of explanation or a simple apology. Instead, both of them let their pride stand tall, like walls growing higher with every unspoken day. What started as silence stretched into months, and then years, until silence itself became the only language between them. Now, decades later, Daniel's hair had turned silver. His hands carried the map of time, and yet the wound remained untouched. He would see Michael's face sometimes in dreams, not as the man he might be now, but as the boy who once swam with him in the summer lake, who once shared secrets beneath the stars. And each time he woke from those dreams, the regret sat heavier in his chest, pressing like a stone he could not move. He often wondered what might have been different if he had chosen forgiveness sooner. How many years of friendship had they both lost? How many memories had been stolen by a stubbornness that now seemed so small compared to the vast emptiness it created? Daniel found himself rehearsing words he would never say, apologies too late to give, questions with no answers. The silence was louder than any argument could have been. Yet beneath the regret lived something more dangerous, quiet fear. What if too much time had passed? What if Michael no longer cared? The thought of reaching out only to be met with rejection felt unbearable. And so Daniel stayed in the safety of his sorrow. It was easier to carry the familiar weight than risk the pain of opening it again. And so he lived, caught between memory and silence, between longing and pride. Every day that passed was another reminder of how forgiveness left undone becomes a chain, locking both hearts in place. Daniel didn't yet know it, but the chain was about to break, not from his own strength, but from the gentle voice of someone who still believed in the power of healing. It was Emily who first noticed the way her father's eyes grew distant. Whenever old memories surfaced, she would sit with him at the kitchen table, listening as he drifted into half-told stories about his youth, stories that always stopped short at the mention of Michael. One evening, as the autumn wind whispered outside, Emily reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her touch was soft, but her words carried a quiet strength. "Dad," she said gently, "I don't know everything that happened between you and Michael, but I see how it still weighs on you. Don't you think it's time?" Daniel lowered his gaze. For years, he had built his sorrow into a kind of armor, convincing himself that silence was safer. Yet his daughter's eyes, filled with warmth and conviction, pierced through that armor more deeply than any reproach ever could. He wanted to dismiss her words, but something inside him stirred something fragile, like a forgotten seed suddenly touched by sunlight. He told Emily about the fight, how it was never really about what was said, but about the silence that followed. He spoke of pride, of how neither he nor Michael wanted to be the first to bend, and how that single choice grew into a lifetime of distance. Emily listened with the patience of someone who understood that pain often hides beneath hardened surfaces. When he finished, she squeezed his hand. Forgiveness isn't about proving who was right or wrong. It's about setting yourself free. If you carry this regret forever, it will keep stealing from you. But if you forgive, you can finally breathe again. Her words lingered long after she left the table. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, replaying their laughter from the past, the boyhood adventures that had once seemed endless. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to let go of the bitterness and simply remember Michael as he was the boy who once called him brother. But along with the hope came fear. What if Michael had moved on? What if he resented Daniel just as much? What if the silence had carved a canyon too wide to cross? The doubts whispered through his mind. Yet Emily's words kept rising above them. Forgiveness isn't about proving anything, it's about freedom. By dawn, Daniel sat at the window, the first light of morning painting the sky in pale gold. His heart trembled with uncertainty, but deep within, a spark had been lit. For the first time in decades, he considered reaching across the silence that had divided his life from his friends. The decision to reach out weighed on Daniel like a mountain. For days he carried the thought in silence, his mind swinging between hope and dread. Sometimes he convinced himself it was too late, that decades of silence could not be undone. Other times, he imagined Michael answering the phone, his voice older but still familiar, bridging the years in a single word. That possibility both frightened and comforted him. Emily noticed his hesitation but did not push. Instead, she reminded him with small gestures, placing an old photo of him and Michael on the table, asking gently about their childhood adventures, leaving quiet space for him to choose. And slowly, Daniel realized she wasn't just asking him to forgive Michael. She was asking him to forgive himself for letting so many years slip away. One evening, Daniel sat in his armchair, the photo of their younger selves in his hands. He traced the edges of the picture, his chest tight with the weight of memory. Finally, he whispered to himself, almost as if testing the words, "It's time." With trembling fingers, he found Michael's number unchanged after all these years and pressed the phone to his ear. Each ring felt like an eternity. Then, a voice answered. It was older, roughened by time, yet undeniably Michael's. There was a pause, long and heavy, before Daniel found the courage to speak. His voice cracked, fragile but sincere. "Michael, it's me." What followed was not anger, nor rejection, but silence different from the silence that had kept them apart. This silence was softer, filled with emotions neither could yet name. Then, slowly, Michael spoke, his voice breaking with the weight of his own years of regret. "I never thought I'd hear from you again." Daniel's heart ached as the walls he had carried for so long began to crumble. Words stumbled from him, apologies mixed with memories, not perfect but real. And to his surprise, Michael did not resist. He, too, had longed for this moment. He, too, had been chained by the same silence. The two men agreed to meet the next day. When Daniel finally saw Michael again, time seemed to fold. They stood there, both aged and weathered, but in their eyes was the same recognition they once shared as boys under the summer stars. Without needing to say much, they embraced, and in that embrace, the years of bitterness melted away. Forgiveness did not erase the past, but it transformed it. What once was a wound became a scar, still there, but no longer painful. A reminder instead of the strength it takes to love again. Daniel realized then what Emily had meant. Forgiveness heals both the giver and the receiver. And as he walked beside Michael once more, he felt lighter than he had in decades, as though life had finally returned something precious that silence had tried to steal. Forgiveness is often thought of as a gift we give to someone else, but in truth, it is the gift that frees us too. Daniel and Michael's story reminds us that time cannot be reclaimed, yet love and understanding can still transform what remains. We cannot undo the past, but we can choose how the future feels in our hearts. If there's someone you've held in silence, perhaps today is the moment to reach across the years. If this story touched you, consider sharing it, leaving a thought in the comments, and subscribing for more gentle reflections.